Among Indo-European mythologies, Slavic mythology is possibly one of the most enigmatic and unexplored. Due to the deficiency of written sources such as prose and poetic eras in Norse mythology, very little is known about the forgotten Slavic entities and gods. Their attributes and functions persist shrouded in mystery. Nevertheless, there is one renowned exception, about which we can glean some fragments of data. Most scholars concur that Perun, the Slavic counterpart of Norse Thor, Greek Zeus, and Baltic Perkun, was venerated by all Slavic tribes. That said, some suggest that his name varied according to location. For instance, on Rügen Island in present-day Germany, where the Rani people resided in the past, there was evidence of a seven-headed deity who wielded 8 swords known as Rugiewit, with some indicating that he may have been one of Perun's numerous incarnations. Rugiewit was also associated with warfare and physical prowess. Saxo Grammaticus reported that his supposed temple was situated in Carentia on Rügen Island, adjacent to temples of Porevit and Poremit. As these deities have multiple heads, their attributes are challenging to define. However, this topic warrants a separate discussion. Let us return to today's subject. Even those who are not particularly interested in Slavic mythology have likely heard of the fall of Arkona, the final pagan city in Europe during the 12th century. Following the siege of Redogosht, it emerged as the primary center of Sventevit cult. It's possible that the four-headed Sventevit deity was also a Western Slavic representation of Perun, as he was a protector of war, justice, and fertility. 300 warriors were under his command, and a sacred horse dwelled beside his temple. It was strictly prohibited for anyone, including the high priest of the deity, to ride a horse except the Sventevit himself. During the night, the four-faced god rode on his horse and battled against evil creatures, like Żmije and dragons, using his sword. Despite surviving with few existing written sources of Slavic spirituality, the worship of Sventevit has been described in detail in Saxo Grammaticus Gesta Danorum and briefly in Helmholtz Chronicle and in Nidlinga Saga. Polish scholar Alexander Geisztor posited in his book Slavic Mythology that the deity is a Polabian variation of Perun the Thunderer, as many of their attributes are similar. Perun's worship under this name is widely recognized by historians as being mainly practiced among the Eastern Slavs, in present-day Ukraine, Belarus and Russia. However, thanks to the linguistic analysis of various names of villages, towns, hills and so on, in Polish, Slovak, Czech, Serbian, Croatian, etc., we can establish with a good amount of certainty that the Thunderer was universally known wherever the Slavs resided. Procopius, the Byzantine scholar, once wrote that the Slavic people believed in a thunder deity, who was the supreme ruler, and to honor him they sacrificed oxen. In Albanian, the word perendi is used to refer to God, deity, sky and heaven, which shows a clear connection to Perun. Moreover, in present-day Slovakia and former Moravia, the term Perun was often used in magical rituals, spells and shamanism. Among the Drevani people, one of the many Polabian tribes living along the Elbe River, the term Perendon referred to Thursday, which was likely a day of sacrifice to their deity. In Helmholtz Chronica Slavorum, it is reported that the oak trees in Burg Stargard were considered sacred to the deity known as Proue. This could possibly be another name for Perun, or maybe a spelling error made by author of the chronicle. We simply do not know. It is important to note that oaks were considered sacred to the Slavic Thunderer and cannot be disregarded in discussion about him. In Macedonia and Bulgaria, people were gathering around those trees as they had been marked before with the tabu sign, which was supposed to protect them from cutting and offending in any other way. The most important feasts and festivals of a given village were performed around those, such as weddings, acts of justice, and certainly Wheel of the Year celebrations. Some scholars believe that, similar to the ash tree being the axis mundi of the cosmos in Norse mythology, the oak played a similar role in Slavic beliefs as the world tree or cosmic tree. This connection to Perun also suggests that he may have been perceived as a creator, or rather co-creator, of the cosmos in certain versions of the Slavic creation myth. Perun, the Slavic god of storms, is strongly correlated with Perkun, the thunder deity of Baltic mythology. This association suggests the possibility of a common Proto-Indo-European weather god, whose reconstructed name is Perkfunos. The root of these three names is Per, which originally meant to strike or to slay. Additionally, the Proto-Indo-European word perkwu can be translated as the oak, while the suffix nos refers to mastery of something. The theonym perkwunos therefore could mean either the striker, the slayer, or the lord of the oaks. An universal hypothesis has been proposed which links the oak tree with thunder in a mythological manner, as these fall trees are often exposed to lightning strikes. In the late 50s, it was believed in Poland that extinguishing a fire caused by lightning was a great offense and bad luck, as the burning object becomes sacred by being struck by lightning. Additionally, South Slavs placed such objects under their house roofs, believing they would offer protection from storms. In the Polish language, the word Perun translates to thunder and is still commonly used today. During the process of Christianization, it is possible that the deity was intentionally demonized by the Christians, who transformed do Pioruna and ty Pierunie into mere swear words, which can be respectively translated as bloody hell and you devil. A similar fate may have also befallen an unknown Slavic deity, possibly a version of the Norse goddess Freya, as black cats have been portrayed throughout history as bringers of bad luck or even death in our folklore. We have briefly established the pre-Christian origins of Perun, the Slavic thunderer, but what are his attributes, functions and stories? According to the Russian primary chronicle by monk Nestor, Vladimir the Great, Prince of Kiev, attempted to form the Slavic pantheon next to his castle, possibly using wooden idols. The chronicle text provides insight into Perun's characteristics and tales. And Vladimir then began to reign alone in Kiev, and he set up idols on the hills outside the castle with the whole, one of Perun, made of wood, with a head of silver and mustache of gold, and others of horse, Dachbog, Stribog, Simargu, and Moklosh. The people sacrificed to them, calling them gods, and brought their sons and daughters to sacrifice them to these devils. It is worth mentioning that Perun is the only deity given a more prominent position, which manifests his significance. The text even provides information and guidelines on how his idol should be depicted. The deity importance is also confirmed on other pages of Nestor's chronicle, as Prince Oleg signed a peace treaty with the Byzantine Empire in 907 Anno Domini. Both sides paid tribute and sealed the pact with oaths. The Byzantines kissed the cross, whereas Oleg and his troops swore by their weapons as well as by their god, Perun, and Veles or Volos, the deity of the underworld, reflecting the establishment of peace. Veles, being a highly mysterious and intricate Slavic deity, is a fascinating subject worthy of a separate video. A comparable incident occurred in 971, but with a significant difference. In this case, only the warriors swore an oath by Perun. The rest of the Rus swore it by Veles, but that, like I said before, is the subject for a separate video. In Novgorod, Russia, there was once a hill dedicated to Perun, with a shrine built in his honor during the 10th century. In the year 988, when all of the lands of Russia were baptized, Archbishop Joachim arrived in Novgorod and ordered the destruction of the altars and the sacred statue of Perun. The statue was tied with ropes, dragged through the dirt, and beaten with sticks. He then ordered that no one should worship the idol any longer. Thus we can tell without any risk that Perun is a central deity of the Slavic pantheon, and probably he held a special place among all the Slavs. Just like his Polabian counterpart, the four-headed Sventovit, he served as the defender of the human realm, combating evil with his axe, which, akin to Thor's hammer, may have been worn by the Slavs as a talisman of good fortune and symbolized the force of life, or even perhaps a heartbeat. Compared to other European thunder gods, little is known about the mythical activity of Perun. However, ethnographers have discovered some information in the folklore, tales, legends and stories that have been passed down through generations by the oral tradition of common people. In the late 19th century, Russian scholars recorded the following legend in a small Belarusian village. There was a sky god who lived alongside the sun and the moon in the heavens, either up in the sky, on a mountain, or at the top of the world cosmic tree. From this vantage point, the sky god surveyed the four corners of the world, which could account for the presence of numerous multi-headed deities in Slavic mythology. It was also a guardian of the cattle, which were highly valued by the adversary of the supreme deity. In Slavic culture, cattle symbolized prosperity, in one's family as they represented wealth and fertility. The enemy resided in the dark forest on black undergrowth and frequently planned to steal the cattle from the mine deity. Finally, it succeeded in stealing the cattle and concealed them in a cave. It then camouflaged itself as a horse, a cow, or even a human and hid beneath the tree, likely beneath the roots of the cosmic tree, the Axis Mundi. After some time, the celestial deity eventually located its foe, struck its shelter with a lightning bolt generated by its axe or hammer, and retrieved the livestock. Following such a momentous triumph, the climate once again becomes wet as the waters are finally discharged. The powerful foe is once again compelled to conceal itself, this time without its cherished livestock, in the murky depths of the underworld. The story may be simple and short, but it incorporates numerous mythological themes and motifs that make it deserving of a separate video, as such tales are rare in Slavic paganism. The benevolent sky deity referred into the legend takes on various forms: Perun or Perkunas, thunder itself, the biblical prophet Elijah, even God the Father, or at times a human hero, a Slavic eunuch, or Saint George, the mythical dragon slayer. Regarding his adversary, there are a few varying accounts. We may delve into the plausibility of it being dragon or Zhmi, a devil or an evil spirit, sometimes linked by some scholars to Veles, which is certainly an intriguing possibility. However, it poses a considerable risk, as Veles himself is perplexing to comprehend due to his often contradictory characteristics. Slavic Zhmi, the dragon, may be associated more with the Norse Jormungand, and perhaps even the Egyptian Apophis, the giant snake, and should be viewed as a significant danger to humanity. In contrast, Veles is sometimes regarded as a deity of wealth and magic in various sources, although his ties to Slavic underworld and afterlife are so obvious that they cannot be disregarded. Some shadows of that tale we discover also in the old Polish legend about the dragon of Wawel Hill in Historia Polonica, written in Latin by Wincenty Kadubek in late 12th and early 13th century, where sons of King Krak, the legendary ruler of Vistulam, fought, or in some versions of this myth, Krak himself, fought the great cattle-demanding beast, called by a chronicle Holophagus, which from Greek means the one who swallows whole. We are going also to cover this myth in another video. All of this indicates an eternal cosmic struggle between the opposing forces of good and evil, as viewed by the ancient Slavs and chronicled in their legends, myths, and folklore. The earliest stories posited that Perun, the Thunderer, a fearsome warrior and ruler of the heavens, personified the concept of goodness, whereas Zhmi, or the dragon, who resided below the roots of the cosmic tree, embodied evil, the blind force of chaos. The Baltic tribes, the ancient Prussians and the ancestors of the modern Lithuanians and Latvians, who have strong cultural and spiritual ties with the Slavs, often invoked Perun to slay liars, bad husbands and malicious neighbors, and called upon him to fight evil spirits and demons. But what about Perun's other attributes? According to some folk tales, Perun rode either a large horse, usually white, or a war chariot. The latter may suggest how old the Slavic myth of the Thunderer really is, with its core rooted in the ancient Indo-European tribes, famous for using such archaic vehicles. The old Belarusian legend depicts Perun riding on such a chariot with a quiver full of arrows in his left hand and a bow in his right hand. The antiquity of Perun's cult could also be proven by his weapon. He struck his enemies with a stone bolt. If a fossil was found, the Slavs would call it Boża Prądka in Poland, all of which stemmed directly from the belief that Perun himself had used it before it was found. Finding such an object was considered a stroke of luck. Likewise, his axe was made of stone, just like Thor's hammer in Norse mythology, and it was believed that it possessed great magical power, capable of protecting one's fortune and good health. All this may lead us to conclude that some kind of thunder god was worshipped among the Slavs even before the Bronze Age, which is very plausible given the common ancestry of all Indo-European peoples. The Slavs also prayed to Perun for rain when they suffered from drought, performing certain similar rituals in different, apparently separate areas, usually gathering around the sacred oak, where the sacrifice was usually a sheep, or in the case of Macedonia, a bull. As a result, the oak was watered with the blood of the prey, in the hope that rain would soon fall. In describing these weather rituals, it is necessary to mention a particularly mysterious being. Peruna, reputedly Perun's wife, is almost completely lost in the shadows of the past. She was known by different names depending on the region. Perperuna or Peperuna in Bulgaria and Macedonia, Perperona in Albania, or according to some scholars, Pereputa among the Rus. In the Bulgarian language, Peperuda literally means butterfly, which may suggest some mythological and symbolic connection with the deity, spirit, or whatever Perperuna actually was. One thing is certain: nothing can be said about her with an absolute 100% certainty. We can learn a little more about her if we look at an ancient Slavic ritual that was practiced in Bulgaria at the end of the 20th century and recorded by ethnographers. When there was a drought in a village, young people would perform a dance or play in which they would choose a young, married girl to be watered by the old women of the village. The chosen girl had to be naked, dressed only in flowers, leaves and herbs. In the Croatian version of this custom, the young woman who accompanied her carried oak branches in their hands, as the oak we have already met was the sacred tree of Perun itself. The most interesting thing, however, is that at the time of the rain ritual and later in folk songs, the chosen girl was called Perperuna. The mysterious companion of Perun, of whom we know so little, could indeed be a real deity if we compare Slavic mythology with other European pantheons. In Norse mythology, we find Thor the Thunderer and his wife Sif. In ancient Greek mythology, Zeus was the ruler of Mount Olympus and resided on its summit with a beautiful Hera at his side. In Roman mythology, Juno was married to Jupiter, and so on. With all this in mind, it seems very unlikely that Perun would rule the heavens all by himself. And yet we have to be very careful in our search for the story of his wife, as the Slavic myths are so difficult to reconstruct. Of course, thunder, lightning and storms in general aren't the only representations of the mythical force called Perun in Slavic culture. The other carriers of his magical power were his animals, commonly identified with the deity, such as the bull, the eagle, the ram, the turkey, and the swallow in the case of Rujevit, Perun's incarnation among the Rani, as well as his plants, especially oaks, and some flowers, whose names are strongly inspired by the word Perun, such as Serbian Perunica, Rus Perin, and so on. In Żmudź, the historical region of present-day Lithuania, the former part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, sheepskin was used as a bait for the rain, just as Zeus called for it in ancient Greece up until the 17th century. Sitting on the fleece, just as Zeus did, which was also considered an aphrodisiac in Slavic and Baltic traditions, was somehow associated with sexuality and perhaps male sexuality, and therefore probably with Perun himself, although Yarilo, the Slavic god of fertility, harvest and spring, could be another possibility. Describing Slavic deities has never been easy. Perun is no exception, but in his case we can establish his core attributes with a fair degree of certainty based on the etymology of his name alone. The Proto-European per simply means to slay, to strike, which makes it obvious that he was the one who fought evil with the magic axe or bow. The diversity and multitude of the Slavs in ancient times, divided not only into tribes but probably also into local families and houses, doesn't make things any easier. But the Thunderer was worshipped everywhere, just under different names. There was the four-headed Sventevit, who rode at night on the back of his horse, smiting dangerous creatures with his blade. Rugian Rugievit, with 7 heads and 8 swords, whose sacred animals were swallows, and actually lived in the hollows of his idol in the temple on the island of Rugen. Polabian Prove, worshipped in a sacred oak grove, where courts were held every Monday. There are many more examples, but let us stop here, so not to make this video too long. Nevertheless, they are all representations of the same power, the same mythical being, worshipped by all the people of the ancient past. Well guys, that will be all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider smashing the like button, subscription and leave a comment, as those are highly helpful. I'll see you guys next time. Chwała Starym Bogom!